Brother-in-law looked at my 9-year-old son's face when he realized there was no gift for him under the tree, and he laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a nervous laugh. Not an awkward laugh. He actually threw his head back and laughed like it was the funniest thing he'd seen all year. "Guess Santa skipped a house," he said, and then turned back to watching his own kids tear into their presents. My son didn't cry. That almost made it worse. He just stood there in his Christmas pajamas, the ones with the little reindeer on them that I bought 2 weeks before because I wanted him to feel like the holiday was special, and he looked at the pile of wrapping paper on the floor that wasn't his. And he went very quiet in the way that kids go quiet when they're trying not to fall apart in front of people. I had been paying my sister's rent for 14 months. I want you to understand that number before I tell you anything else. 14 months. 14 checks, ranging from $800 to $1,200 to $1,200 depending on what they were short that month, all sent without a single complaint from me, because my sister is my sister. And when she told me she and her husband were struggling after he got laid off, I said yes. I didn't hesitate. I didn't ask for a repayment schedule or make her feel small about it. I just sent the money because that's what you do for family. I'm 31. I work as a project manager for a logistics company, and I'm good at my job. I bought my own condo 3 years ago, a 2-bedroom in a nice part of Columbus that I am very proud of because I did it alone. My son's father has not been in the picture since Oliver was 4. It's been just the two of us since then, and we've built a good life together. Not extravagant, solid. I budget carefully. I drive a 2019 Honda CR-V with 60,000 miles on it that I will be driving for another 5 years at minimum, and I think that's completely fine. My sister Nina and her husband Greg have 3 kids, Caitlin, who is 12, and the twins Mason and Jake, who are 8. They live in a 4-bedroom house in a suburb outside Cleveland that, I found out later, costs $2,400 a month to rent. They have 2 cars, both newer than mine. Their kids are in travel, soccer, and private swim lessons. Greg coaches one of the soccer teams and drives the carpool every weekend in a Chevy Suburban that I'm fairly certain is leased. When Greg got laid off 18 months ago, I understood that things were tight. I did. Losing income is terrifying, and I didn't want Nina to have to pull the kids from their activities or stress about keeping the house, so I helped. What I didn't understand, not fully, not until Christmas morning in their living room, was that they had never actually changed anything about how they lived. The swim lessons continued. The travel soccer continued. The Suburban continued. The 4-bedroom house with a finished basement and the 2-car garage continued. And my $1,000 a month continued to make all of that possible, while Greg spent the better part of a year exploring his options, and Nina bought her kids a Nintendo Switch, an iPad, and a brand new bike each for Christmas. Oliver got nothing. That's not entirely accurate. There was a gift bag near the back of the tree with his name on it. I saw Nina hand it to him after I said something with my eyes that she clearly understood. He pulls out a coloring book, the cheap kind from the dollar bin at Target, the ones where the pages are so thin the marker bleeds through immediately, and a 4-pack of markers. Oliver is 9. He hasn't used a coloring book since he was 6. He said, "Thank you," with perfect manners, set it down, and went to sit in the corner of the sectional while his cousins ran circuits around the house screaming about their new things. Greg watched him and said, "Hey, at least he got something," and he said it right to me, looking me dead in the eye. I felt something go very still inside me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene in front of the kids. I am a single mother who has been managing difficult emotions in confined spaces for 5 years, and I know how to hold something in long enough to deal with it properly. I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretense of getting coffee, stood over the sink for about 45 seconds, and made a decision. I want to back up and explain how the Christmas budget had worked, because it matters for what happened next. Every year our family does a gift exchange. Adults draw names for each other and spend around $75 on that one person. For the kids, the rule has always been that aunts and uncles buy for all the children in the family, and the expectation is roughly equal. My mother started this tradition when Nina and I were small, and she wanted to make sure neither of us ever felt like the other was more loved. I had 6 gifts in the back of my car. I had spent $340 total. I know the exact number because I had tracked it in my notes app. For Caitlin, I got a journaling set she'd mentioned wanting, the kind with the nice pens and the embossed cover. For Mason and Jake, I got them each a separate Lego set because they hate sharing and always fight over toys, and I'd asked Nina back in October what they were into. For Nina, I got a cashmere blend throw blanket from a boutique I knew she liked. For Greg, I had drawn his name in the adult exchange and gotten him a Yeti tumbler and a gift card to a sporting goods store. For Oliver, I had wrapped a pair of Jordans in his size that he'd been asking about since September. All 6 of those gifts were in a tote bag in my trunk. I had brought them inside when we arrived and set them under the tree. They were there when we started opening gifts. And then, sometime in a chaos of ripping paper and exclamations and Greg loudly narrating the cost of everything he and Nina had bought, that bike was $350 by the way, got it on sale, I noticed that Oliver's name hadn't come up. And then the gift giving was winding down. And my son was still sitting there. When I saw Nina reach for that Target gift bag, I knew. I knew before she even handed it to him. And something about watching her hand my child a dollar bin coloring book while his cousin sat surrounded by hundreds of dollars of things that I had quietly, consistently, without complaint, helped make possible. Something in me just snapped clean. I went out to my car for the tote bag while everyone was distracted. I told Oliver I needed help carrying something, so he came with me, which meant he wasn't in the room when I walked back to the tree and started picking up the gifts I'd brought. Caitlin's journal set, the 2 Lego boxes, Nina's blanket, Greg's Yeti tumbler. I put them all back in the tote bag. Then Oliver and I went back inside and I sat down next to my sister on the couch. "I need to talk to you," I said, quietly enough that the kids couldn't hear. Nina looked at the tote bag. "What's that?" "The gifts I brought. I'm taking them home." She stared at me. "What? Why?" "Because your husband just watched my son sit there with nothing and made a joke about it. And you handed him a coloring book from the dollar bin. I spent $340 on gifts for your family, Nina." Oliver got a 4-pack of markers. Her face went through several things in quick succession. First confusion, then something defensive. "We've been struggling, you know that." "I know," I said. "I've been helping. For 14 months. The room wasn't quiet. The kids were still loud. Greg was in the kitchen, my mother was somewhere behind us. But the space between me and Nina went very quiet. "I'm not going to make a scene," I told her. "But I'm leaving and I'm not going to be sending money next month, or the month after that." Nina grabbed my arm. "You can't just, we're counting on that." And there it was. Not, "I'm sorry Oliver felt left out." Not, "You're right, that wasn't fair." Just, "We're counting on that." "I know you are," I said. And that's exactly the problem. I called Oliver over, helped him into his coat, and said our goodbyes to my mother and the kids. Oliver carried the coloring book out because I wasn't going to take it away from him. It wasn't his fault, and he'd said thank you for it, and that matters. Greg came out of the kitchen when he heard us getting ready to leave and said with genuine surprise, "You're heading out?" "We haven't even eaten yet." I looked at him, this man who had not worked in 18 months, who coached travel soccer on weekday mornings, who leased a Suburban, who laughed at my child's empty spot under the tree. And I said, very calmly, "Merry Christmas, Greg." And I walked out. Oliver asked me in the car if I was sad. I told him the truth because I've always tried to tell him the truth in age-appropriate ways. I said that sometimes people we love do things that hurt our feelings, and it's okay to feel sad about that and still love them. He thought about it for a minute and then said, "Mom, did you bring gifts for them?" I said yes. He said, "Did you take them back?" I said yes. He was quiet again. Then he said, "Okay, that seems fair." I almost had to pull over. When we got home, I put his Jordans under our small tree. Just the one in the living room, the 4-foot artificial one we've had for 6 years. And I let him open them that night instead of waiting for the next morning, because we'd had a hard day and he deserved something good. He screamed in the way that 9-year-old boys scream when something is exactly right, and he put them on immediately over his pajama pants and wore them for the rest of the evening. My phone started going off around 8 p.m. "Nina first, can we talk?" "I didn't know he didn't get you anything." "The coloring book was Mom's idea. I should have added more." "Please don't do this." Then my mother, "Your sister is upset." "I understand you're frustrated, but this isn't the way to handle it. Family doesn't cut each other off over a misunderstanding at Christmas." Then Greg, "Look, I shouldn't have said what I said. It came out wrong. I'm not a bad person. I'm just stressed. We really need your help right now." I read all of them. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter. I made Oliver hot chocolate with the mini marshmallows, the kind he likes, and we watched a movie together until he fell asleep on the couch, which I let him do because it was Christmas and some rules bend. The next morning, I sent Nina one message. I said, I love you and I love your kids. I am not angry. But I've been contributing nearly $1,000 a month to your household for over a year, and my son sat at your Christmas without a gift while you handed your kids hundreds of dollars of presents. I don't think you did that on purpose, but I do think you stopped seeing what I was giving you as a gift and started seeing it as something you were owed. I need that to stop. I'll be here if you genuinely need to talk. She didn't respond for 3 days. When she did, it wasn't an apology. It was a long message about how hard things had been, how Greg was still interviewing, how the kids' activities were important for their development, how she felt like I was punishing the children for adult problems. She said I was being cruel. She said I had embarrassed the whole family by leaving. She said she hoped I'd reconsider. I didn't reconsider. My mother called me twice in the following week. The first call I let go to voicemail. The second I answered and she told me I was being selfish, that family is supposed to support each other, that I was in a better position than Nina and it wasn't fair to withdraw that support without warning. I listened to everything she said and then I told her, as respectfully as I could, that I had given 14 months of warning. Every check I sent was a month of warning. The warning was the help. And the moment Greg looked at my son's empty hands and made a joke, the warning became insufficient. My mother didn't have an answer for that. There was a long silence on the phone. Then she said, I just don't want the family to fall apart. I don't either, I told her. But the family was already letting Oliver fall through the cracks. That's not a family I can keep funding. It has been 2 months. I don't know exactly what Nina and Greg's financial situation looks like now. I know Greg got a job offer in January because my mother mentioned it. A project coordinator role at a construction firm, which is something at least. I don't know if they've adjusted their lifestyle or if they're still hemorrhaging money on things they can't afford. That's not mine to manage anymore. What I do know is that Oliver wore those Jordans to school the first day back after break, and his best friend told him they were clean, which is apparently 9-year-old for extraordinary. He came home beaming. He told me about it in the car on the way home, in that half-breathless way kids talk when something good happened, and they can't slow down enough to get it all out at once. I sat at a red light and thought about the 14 months of checks. I thought about the coloring book. I thought about Greg's laugh. And then the light turned green, and my son was still talking, and I let it go. Some things you fund. Some things you fundee stop funding. And sometimes the most generous thing you can do for yourself, and for your kid, and maybe even for the people who took you for granted, is to close the account and drive home. I keep coming back to the moment Oliver said that seems fair. He's 9. He didn't know the full picture. The 14 months of checks, the swim lessons I helped fund, the Suburban I indirectly made possible. He just knew that I had brought gifts and then taken them back, and to him, that made sense. Kids understand fairness in a way adults sometimes spend years trying to unlearn. What Greg and Nina lost that Christmas wasn't just $340 worth of gifts. It was the version of me that would absorb being treated poorly and still show up the next month with another check. That version had been running on a very specific kind of self-deception. The idea that giving without limit is the same as being a good person. I've had to sit with the fact that it isn't. Generosity without discernment isn't virtue. It's just a habit that other people learn to exploit. And the longer you let it run, the more invisible you become to the people you're running it for. I don't say that bitterly. I say it because it took me 14 months and a $1 coloring book to understand it clearly. There is something that happens when you make a hard decision calmly. Not screaming, not crying in front of everyone, not making a speech. Just quietly picking up what's yours and walking out. It requires a certain kind of mental clarity that I don't think I could have found if I'd reacted the second Greg laughed. That pause I took at the kitchen sink. Those 45 seconds. That was the most important thing I did that day. I've learned that the situations that most demand an immediate emotional explosion are usually exactly the ones that most reward a slow, deliberate response. Oliver is going to remember that Christmas. Not because it was the worst one. It wasn't, not by the end. He remembers the Jordans. He remembers wearing them over his pajama pants. He remembers his best friend calling them clean. But somewhere underneath that, I think he also absorbed something that I can't fully put into words yet. That his mother saw what happened, decided it was wrong, and did something about it. Quietly, without making him feel like a burden or a cause. Without falling apart. That's the thing about raising a kid alone. Every move you make is a lesson you didn't mean to teach. I want him to grow up knowing that integrity isn't just an idea. It's what you do when you're standing in someone else's kitchen at Christmas and you have to decide what kind of person you're going to be in the next 10 seconds. I want him to know that being kind and being a pushover are not the same thing. That you can love someone and still hold a firm line. That the line, in fact, is part of the love. Greg got a job in January. I hope he keeps it. I hope Mina finds a way to build a life that doesn't require borrowing from the people around her. I genuinely mean that. But I also know now that hoping for people isn't the same as funding them indefinitely while they look the other way. Some people only start to see what they had after it's gone. And sometimes the most honest thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is to let them find out.